Hey legends, I'm going to try and do a bit of more of a minimalistic approach to this video. So let me know what you think if you've watched my other videos. I just kind of need to go off the cuff a little bit because something that is really bothering me is all of these videos about success stories, videos on success stories that are talking about manifesting text messages or DMs. Like, to me, that's not a success story because all of those people are wanting more from that person than a text message or a DM or a story like or a post like. Some of you are getting so fucking excited about them viewing your story on social media. You're literally setting an energetic glass ceiling that is where your worth lies because you're putting so much importance and weight on a text message. And there's a few things that I want to say about this. Firstly, if you're watching videos about people who are talking about success stories with their clients and all they're talking about is them getting a text message, what happens after that? If they've not done their self-concept work, if their nervous system is still out of whack, if they don't put more of a focus on themselves, do we know what's happening after the success story about a text message? Do we know if that went any further? Do we know? Because like ultimately what these people want is a long-term committed, preferably healthy relationship, right? We're not really hearing anything past the success story. And I'm going to keep doing that because to me, it's not the success story. The success story is the end goal. The end goal is the long-term, committed, healthy relationship. A text message doesn't even necessarily have to be the first step to that. And so many of you are actually creating a detour whereby it has to be when the most efficient route to your manifestation of a relationship might not happen that way as a first step. So you're then creating the detour that, oh, everything has to now shift to make the text message happen first, which if you haven't done your self-concept work and your nervous system regulation and put the focus on yourself doing feel-good things and having a life of your own outside of this thing that you want, you're going to end up just self-sabotaging that situation, especially if there's like an old story about the person that you're getting the text message from, which for most of you, that is the case. It's someone that you've been involved with previously or interacted with previously, maybe not on a romantic level, but you were talking and you were interested in them. And then the conversation dwindled and you wanted to strike the conversation back up so that you could turn it into something more serious, right? When you don't do the things that actually help you remember who the fuck you inherently are and have always been before anyone came along and made you doubt, forget, or question it, then you're still the version of you that you were when you couldn't get the text message in the first instance, or that couldn't keep the conversation up for it to turn into a relationship, couldn't get past a text conversation. So can you manifest in steps? Yes, you can. Is a text message necessarily the first step on the most efficient route to your end goal of a long-term, committed, healthy relationship? Not necessarily. And I talk about this with people on my live streams on TikTok all the time, which is linked below if you want to follow me there and hit the notification bell on there and get notified when I go live. I do it at least a couple of times a week usually. And so many people are coming on talking about text messages, story views, things like that. And when the conversation inevitably wanes a little bit, they freak out. If you were in a relationship with someone, would you be freaking out about them like not messaging you back, or would you be like, oh, I'll see them tonight, I'll just talk to them about it then? So you can manifest in steps, and the only reason, and I used to find manifesting in steps easier as well, so I will talk about that a little bit and what I do now that makes it easier to live from the end goal. I used to find it easier to manifest in steps as well, but that came from a place of needing, wanting to control, wanting to micromanage from a place of fear. It's all coming from a place of fear that if you're not in control and making someone do something, then they won't do it. And that's not how this shit works. So whilst you may be able to manifest in the text message, or you may be able to manifest in the thing that you want, like to whatever degree, if you're still the version of you that you were, the version of you who had forgotten your inherent worth, value, deservedness, then you're just going to keep finding yourself in the same cycle of hot and cold communication, or different people, same scenario over and over again. If anything, it'll get worse and worse every time, because every time your ego takes a hit when you haven't done any work to build it up, you go backwards even further. You become more triggered. You become more like toxic, really. Think about all of the situations that haven't worked out, whether it be friendship, relationship, whatever, and what's the common denominator? It's you. So why do I talk about integrating the things that I refer to as my cheat codes when it comes to conscious manifestation? Because I learned the hard way. If you watched any of my videos before, you would have heard this. If you've been on my live streams before, you would have heard this. I learned the hard way by listening to the coaches who talk solely about affirming and persisting, until the anxiety built up so gradually and then became so prolonged and constant that it chipped away at me to the point of me burning out. My self-concept actually got worse, if I'm being honest with you. Because when I look back at like my best friendships, my best relationships, prior to doing this work, after learning the hard way, after going backwards, listening to the advice of these coaches who talk about just affirming and persisting, I had friendships where people would say, you know, I thought you were a bitch when I first met you, and now you're one of my best friends, and I really respect you. I had a flatmate once who I ended up being friends with. We weren't that close when we were flatmates, and I pulled her up when she was essentially being racist towards a taxi driver, and we had an argument about it. And I had that argument with her, not giving a flying fuck if she liked me or not. She was doing the wrong thing. She came back up to my room 5 minutes later, apologized, and said, I thought you were a fence sitter, but I actually really respect that you stood up for me. I was in the wrong. Because I did those things from a place of not giving a flying fuck what anyone thought about me. Somewhere along the line, there were these situations in my life, including it that must not be named. I'm in Melbourne, which was one of the most locked down places in the world at that time. And that, coupled with a few other things that were going on, and then coming across the law of assumption at that time, led to me not respecting myself as much, because I was told by law of assumption coaches, don't address things in the physical world, just do it up here. So I stopped sticking up for myself. I stayed in situations that didn't feel good instead of moving away from them and allowing them to shift into the situation that I wanted and preferred. I kept going and checking and trying to just affirm and persist through the discomfort of being in these situations that didn't feel good, around people, versions of people that didn't feel good, that chipped away at my self-confidence and my mental health. And I got burnt out, and I had no choice then but to remove myself. And this is where the cheat codes came in. I looked back and I thought, I haven't always been that person. Like, what changed? And I worked out that, itchy leg. I worked out that I had been anxious without realizing that I was anxious, because I was so used to feeling anxious. So I didn't feel the anxiety coming up because I was always in it. I looked back at those previous experiences. I mean, there are ones to do with romantic situations as well, but I try to talk as generally as possible because I know a lot of you are here for love, but I don't want the videos about love specific things to become a crutch, because you manifest everything the same way. It's really long. So I ended up not losing respect for myself, which meant that the people around me stopped treating me with as much respect. And that just kept growing and growing. And then I was getting more and more frustrated with it. And I'd be able to stay on top of my thoughts long enough to see a little bit of change, but not enough to override the frustrations that I had already built up from the old story. And I kept putting myself in a situation where I was around these circumstances once or twice a week at least, constantly having it in my face, having to counteract it. So I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent, right? But the easiest way that I have found since then that makes living from the end just, like, again, easy. We talk a lot about how, like, the concept of law of assumption is very simple, but it's not always the easiest. This will make it the easiest I've ever found it to be. And that's incorporating, obviously, the self-concept work that most law of assumption coaches, teachers, whatever are talking about, but also nervous system regulation work. I talk about this in almost every video. Why? Because when you're not feeling anxious, you're not caught on that loop. Your body stores feelings. And when you're getting that visceral feeling of anxiety and frustration and anger and all those things that make you feel out of control and therefore try to control things, which actually just repels things, it triggers the thoughts to go on those spirals, which are a lot harder to stop. When you come from a cool, calm, collected place, a calm nervous system, you don't get caught on that loop. It allows you to actually release the past feelings that you were associated with those scenarios that you were finding triggering. The old story, being around people, becomes easier, but you need to take some space away from them, do the work, and then discern as time goes on, how do I feel about it? Do I feel anxious now? Let me do some breath work now, or some tapping now. How do I feel about it now? Still anxious? Then I might pass today. Calmer than before? Then I'll go. Okay? You're going to just find that you also are less triggered more and more over time, the more you do the nervous system regulation work to things that used to trigger you a lot. So really, essentially, it'll have the opposing effect of putting out, like, just manifesting a text message only to act from fear when the conversation naturally starts to taper off, then putting the other person on the other end of the phone off texting you. If anything, it'll make you more and more okay with that over time. Or whatever the situation is that you find triggering. If you're getting triggered by situations regarding text messages, what are you going to be like when you're in a relationship with someone if you manage to manifest that in, and your nervous system is still the nervous system you had as someone who was triggered and got in your own way and pushed away the things you wanted in the past? Then we can take it to the next level by doing the feel-good things. What did you like doing? What did you enjoy? What were your hobbies before this thing that you now want came along, whether it's a thing, person, or situation? So many people, and I've been guilty of it in the past, I used to see my friends do it all the time. They'd become the people they were seeing and totally abandoning who they were before they met those partners, whatever. And then again, I came to a weird place in my life where I kind of did that to some degree. When you do feel good things that you enjoy, you remember who you are. These are things that you need to continue doing, including the nervous system regulation work. It has an accumulative effect. Don't just do it when you're triggered, do it before you're triggered, so that if you get triggered, it's less full on and will get less and less full on over time. But when you remember who the fuck you are, you're not relying on anyone to fill anything for you, and then you can just enjoy them. Because when you're putting the pressure on them fulfilling all those things for you, that's coming from a place of needing, and you don't need something you already have, and we are living projectors. Not to mention that when you feel good, right, whilst it's your thoughts, most consistent thoughts and subconscious beliefs that manifest, most consistent thoughts become beliefs, right? When you feel good, your mind is going, like, good in general, it doesn't have to be the good feeling that you would have in a relationship specifically, or with all the money that you want specifically, when you feel good in general, your mind and body start to connect the feeling of feeling good with the thing you're thinking about, instead of what's probably happening to so many of you now, which is when you think about the thing that you want, your nervous system kicks up and you feel anxious. And then you start like really trying to hammer in the affirmations. In the earlier days, for me, did it help me feel better to just focus on the thoughts? Yeah, it did. And I always use this example when I'm on live streams for people who are like asking me questions that I've answered before, who are new to my content and everything. I've known people who are like self-proclaimed, like functioning alcoholics, right? I'm not a big drinker myself. It's not being judgy. They self-proclaimed, this is what they would refer to themselves as. And I would always be like, oh, I don't know how you do it. Like, I can't imagine being hungover every day. It sounds awful. And they'd be like, oh, we don't get hangovers. You know, there was a couple that I like was friends with for a while, and they both said that they were functioning alcoholics, and they're like, we don't get hangovers. And then there was like, I don't know if it was dry July or something like that, but they did that and they were like, oh my God, I feel so good. And I was like, yeah, because you were so used to feeling shit that you thought that was normal. It's the same with your nervous system. When you're constantly in a heightened state, high alert, which most people are just because of the modern world we live in. But then if you add like trauma or heartbreak or insecurities and things like that to it, you're there, like you're even more heightened. When you do the nervous system regulation work, even if you think you're not anxious, you feel that calm, and then you're like, oh, I was anxious. And that's why I say just to do it. I think it's something that honestly everyone should do. Everyone should prioritize every day. Do I do it every day? No. Do as I say, not as I do. I'm in a good place now where like I was doing it pretty consistently, that like most days I'm pretty chill, and I just need to address the anxiety as it's a little twinge. But I recognize the twinge because I'm not there all the time. That's the point. Okay. So when you get that text message and you're in a cool, calm, collected place, you're not going to freak out when they don't message back. You're not going to try to force the conversation to continue by asking a question when they didn't ask a question in their last message to obligate them to have to respond. Okay. All these things that are repelling people. You'll stop feeling the urge to do those things as much. And when you have other things going on in your life, you'll feel good things. You're not sitting at home waiting on a text message. Waiting is projecting out, not having. Trying, controlling, micromanaging is projecting out, not having. So if you're trying to control how you get to your end goal, you're essentially putting out there that you don't like have that thing yet. And again, whilst you can manifest the end goal to be exactly how you want it to be and to come about exactly how you want it to be, you are most likely never going to even be able to fathom what the most efficient route would be if you just lived from the end. So when you feel really calm, when you're enjoying your life, doing the feel good things, when you're building up your self-concept to remind yourself who the fuck you really are, inherently are, before anything came along, anyone or anything came along and made you question, doubt, forget. You're not thinking as much about the thing you want, which is not a bad thing. I repeat myself a lot in these videos, I know, because I think it takes a while to get the message for some people, which like I've been there. But you're not thinking as much about it, so you're not thinking as many opposing thoughts about it. You're feeling good, so when it does naturally pop into your mind, you're associating the good feeling with the thought of the thing, which means when it comes about in the physical world, you're going to be less triggered by it. You're going to be less likely to self-sabotage. You're less likely to go into, oh, like I've gotten it before though and it didn't work out, or whatever. You know what I mean? My parents used to say this thing when we were growing up, which was like I can see how it created so many circumstances in our lives then, but they used to say, oh, what a beautiful day. Like when a day was good and we were actually having a good run. Oh, what a beautiful day, ... Like they wouldn't say ... There would be signs and then it'd be like, now watch someone come along and fuck it up. Do you know how many times that happened? So you'll be more in a place of like accepting that it's good and it's allowed to be good. You're allowed to be happy. It's okay to enjoy this moment. It's not going to be taken away from you. Gone off on a tangent. Oh, yes. And you'll also not think as much about the when, the how, the middle in general. So you'll be able to just think from the end. When it pops into your mind, you'll just be able to go, yeah, cool. We're in this perfect, happy, healthy, committed relationship. And what I want to add to that as well, a lot of people think, and you can do this, but a lot of people think living from the end is thinking of an end scene, whether it's visual or scripted or said or heard in your mind or with like a recording or something, of the actual moment of, for this example, commitment, right? But it's actually more, and I'm not a Nevilleite, I'm not a Neville Goddard devotee. He was one teacher of teaching like one interpretation of an ancient knowledge, right? But when he talks about living from the end, because so many people come to law of assumption very much, you know, from the teachings of Neville or modern interpretations of the teachings of Neville, he's referring to a scene that actually implies that that moment of committing to each other already happened. So that could be like an anniversary, or you posting a picture of you with an engagement ring on, you together on socials, if that's your thing. So yeah, just to make that clear. So I find it really easy to live from the end now. I find it very easy to not spiral. Like I just, in the sense that like it just doesn't happen often. And when it does, it's usually when I'm neglecting doing my nervous system regulation work regularly. My mind doesn't go to trying to figure out how this current thing in front of my face, even if it seems like the logical link to my end goal, could be part of it, because sometimes it's not, and often it's not, right? But then you're in it and you think like, oh, well, they're here, so that must be part of my end goal. So I'm going to like now act from a place of fear, not trusting that it's all coming together, and kind of try to push it along a little bit more, a little faster, so it happens faster, which actually has the opposite effect. It pushes it away. It makes it take longer. Okay. But yeah, those are the things like you really want to work towards living from the end. The easiest way to do that, living from the end, as opposed to worrying so much about a text message or whether they're liking your posts or viewing your story. I can't tell you how many stories I just skip through on social media, like on my business account. So like that's not to take away anything, but it's more that I used to always say like nothing's bigger or smaller than anything else. Share any success story with me. And I do like to hear those things because I like to see the progress, the progression, so that when I get the very end goal success story that I will share, and those are the only ones I'll share. I'm not going to share success stories about text messages. Share them with me because like I'll cheer you on and help encourage you. But they're not going to be the ones that I share on my story, on my YouTube, because those aren't the end success. Those are steps along the way. And I think the only people who will really feel okay with posting success stories about things like text messages when the end goal is a long-term committed, happy, healthy relationship are people who are morally okay with kind of preying on the vulnerability and, for lack of a better word, desperation of people who want love. And we all want love, and everyone wants to love and be loved in return, and everyone deserves that, right? I don't have an issue with it. As I always say, I've been there. But I wish that there were people speaking about it in the way that I'm speaking about it back then. Because honestly, I would have gotten to my end goals in various manifestations so much faster. So fuck the text message. Who cares? Okay. And also have things to do, feel good things to do, so that you're not just waiting on that text message. All right, let me go into a whole other rant. Because if you're always available immediately, and I'm not saying pretend that you're not available, I'm saying actually have things going on in your life. Even if they're things that you do on your own, so that you're not immediately texting back. If you happen to be available to text back straight away, do it. That's fine. But also, with the people on my live stream that bring these things up, a lot of them are trying to force a conversation. You can knowingly take inspired action. I've spoken about that in other videos. I'll link that here. But if you're doing it from a place of fear that if you don't initiate, it's not going to happen, it's going to backfire. It's not going to go the way you want it to. It may not be a big thing, but it'll be probably enough to throw you off, to spiral, to make you feel shitty. If you can do it from a place of like not caring about what happens when you send the text message, initiate the chat, then fine. But also keep this in mind. If you're wanting them to make the effort more, initiate more, prioritize you more, right? And you're the one who's always initiating. If you're always the one initiating, how can they ever initiate? You're always initiating. You've got to actually give them a chance to be the version of them that kicks off the conversation. But also, again, I want to say, because again, I know so many of you are going to be wrapped up in the text message idea. Have you never heard of a story about people bumping into people in the street? It could happen that way. I'm not saying create that it happens that way, but I'm saying live from the end and let it happen and unfold via the path of least resistance, the most efficient path, which will likely not be the way that you would logically put it together in your mind. You might bump into them in the street and they go, oh shit, I haven't seen or spoken to you in a while. Let's catch up for brunch on the weekend. Yeah, cool. All right, cool. Have a good rest of your day. I'll text you. Or let's meet here. That's happened to me many times. Not necessarily in the romantic sense, but it happens. And all manifestations the same. Specific people isn't always necessarily romantic. You could be trying to improve a relationship with a family member or a friendship, right? Mend a friendship, whatever. But that could also happen with like someone that you end up romantically linked with. You know, there are people who lived next door to each other, never remember meeting each other, and then go traveling on the other side of the world and end up meeting there somehow and end up together and then find out that they were like, is it Elise Myers on TikTok? She's a huge TikToker. I'm sure most of you, if you're on TikTok, you know who Elise Myers is. She posted a video on one of her TikToks once of her and her now hubby as children in the same photo. But they didn't even live in the same part of the country when they got together, I believe. Okay? So keep that in mind. Your like manifestation isn't logical. It'll make sense. There'll be like a seemingly logical bridge of incidents when you look back once you get the thing that you want of like how it came together, because that's how this world that we're in works. But if you're trying to make something happen in a logical way, are you going to be able to get it that way? Yeah. But is it going to be the most efficient route to your end goal? Most of the time, no. In fact, I would say probably 100% of the time, no. Okay, so chill out on the text messages, do the nervous system regulation work. Write down what were the things that you liked doing before this personal situation came into your life when you kind of got who you are, right? And even then, before then, you probably didn't fully know who you are. And that's what I'll be helping the people who do the solid self-concept course when that's released to uncover, remind themselves of, okay? Because you can remember who the fuck you are. The game of it all is that only you can remind yourself. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. You're fucking legends. Don't ever forget it. And until the next time, have a good one. Let me know what you think of this less edited format. I'd love to hear it. Oh, if you want to like, share, comment, and subscribe, it helps me a lot. So that would be appreciated. Bye.